I'm going to say something about what to expect for quizE. quizE is the quiz over the material that you're responsible for from this link. So this link is to AP Computer Science Principles content at Khan Academy. This is content that's not in our Automate the Boring stuff, which is why we're looking at it in Khan Academy. It's a pretty good source. So in particular, we are looking at the parts here that are talking about binary and hexadecimal. You can read the logic, gates, and circuits, but I'm not going to ask you any questions about those in this class. Computer components, we'll have some questions about those. And computer files. And that's it. So that's the content you're responsible for. There are videos and good notes and little quiz questions. So I'm not going to give you videos explaining this content. Instead, I'm just going to point out what kinds of questions we're going to ask. So you probably want to pause, go and look at that stuff, and then come back to see what you're supposed to be able to do. Okay. So these are just vocabulary words. We'll ask those as usual, where I will give a definition similar to this, and you're supposed to know the vocabulary word. These converting ones here, within the content there, you learn how to convert between binary and decimal and hexadecimal. So base 2, base 10, base 16, that's all in there. You're supposed to be able to do that. This here is just a description to remind me, and possibly it could remind you of how to do that. So the way that they talk about in there to convert from base 2 to base 10, is that each bit in the number, each position, is worth a higher power of 2. So you multiply by 2, and this number here would represent 1. This is a more interesting one here. This represents 2 plus 8. Okay, so this note here is just to remind you of this is the way to do it. And for some of them, there's more than one method. I'm not going to say anything about that in this video. So you should at least be able to do it the way they do it in here. Okay. These are facts, and I could ask you similar facts. What is the largest binary number that uses 4 bits? A binary number is all ones and zeros. And which is larger, a 1 or a 0? A 1. So if you have 4 bits that have to be 0 or 1, the biggest thing you can have is 4 ones, and if you convert that, then that means 15 in decimal. What's the largest hexadecimal number? Now you need to go over and understand hexadecimal numbers, but something I could ask is, like, what's the largest 2-digit number? And there's the answer, but I could ask you similar questions. These are vocabulary words from the Khan Academy. I will say there's just one or two things here that I've said that are not over there, or at least I didn't notice them over there. Memory. So what memory does for you in your computer is it stores the programs while they run. So my Chrome browser here, it's keeping track of its stuff in memory. And if I turn off all the power, then it would be gone, and I would start it up, and maybe it would remember what tabs I had open and maybe not. So RAM is the memory that our programs is running in. It's called main memory. It is temporary. When you turn off the power, it is gone. In the Khan Academy, they're talking about secondary memory, and I would normally call it external storage instead. That's more commonly what you would hear. Long-term storage. So your drive, your disk drive or your solid state drive or your flash drive that stores data long term. You turn off the power, it's still there. And one thing that we'll note is that this kind of memory, RAM, main memory, is faster. It needs to be faster because the computer is using it right now. So it's faster, but it's more expensive versus the external storage, which you can get larger but will be slower. Okay, file extensions. There's information in there about different types of files. So I wanted to say, in addition to what they had there, so here are some different file types that you should know what they are. So XLSX is an Excel file. It's not a text format. Py is a Python file normally, and it's text. So it's just text in there that we're thinking of as Python code. HTML is also just text. If you have an HTML file, that's a web page, it's just text, but then the browser is interpreting it. CSV is another text format that we might see where we would load it into Excel. It's a spreadsheet, but a text-based. And then all of these are not text-based. Okay. Determining the type of a file. If you're not sure, then there's a cute trick that I'm going to show here. And if you're, let's see, I will go to my information here. So these are just some files on my account on the CS server. They're called .pdf, so they're probably PDF files, but I can check it with a file called hexdump. And I can look at the first 16 bytes. This is going to look at the first 16 bytes of the file. So I'll look at the mozilla.pdf here. This here is printing out, if you take the bits that are in the file, because everything in the computer is just bits, if you take those bits and you think of them as hexadecimal numbers, that's what this is. So the first 8 bits are 25 in hex, and that would be 00101, let's see, 0101. That's the first 8 bits in the file. The next 8 bits is this in hex, and so on. So this is the first 16. If we think of those as text, so we can tell the computer what would that be if it's just like strings, like text. And we can see there, this is if it's thinking of it as text. So if we took these actual bits and now think of them as text instead, this is what we would get, and we see the PDF there. And there's a link here to a website, which is kind of cool, where it has file signatures. If I search for PDF, then I can see that %PDF dash that I saw right here, and it also has that hex code. So if I had a file mozilla.pdf and it was called, let's just say it was called mozilla.txt instead, and I tried to open it with nano, and it looks like that doesn't look right. That doesn't look like a text file. There's strange stuff. So I could look at the first part there, and I can see this as text right there. So that would tell me that this is actually not a text file. It's probably a PDF file because when I look at the first part there, this is what it is. So a lot of files, there will be some bytes at the beginning that's just text that will tell you what it is. So BMP file, it has these hex values if we're looking at the bits as hex, but those are actually the text BM. But not everything has bits at the beginning that you can view in text, but you could always view it like this and see what the actual hex values would be of those bits. So yeah, you can look through this list here and look up. There's JPEG, and so there's different options for what could be at the beginning of a JPEG file that would, if you didn't know what the file was and you saw this as the first part of your hex dump, you think it might be a JPEG file. Okay? So that is the file extensions, and then file sizes here. You need to know the metric prefixes for 1,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000, 1,000,000,000,000, 1,000,000,000. Those get used with size of memory and size of drives and speeds. So a megabyte is 1,000,000 bytes. A megahertz is 1,000,000 hertz.